Sometimes the only way to escape a monster is to walk straight into the arms of a devil. Ava Monroe had exactly 3 seconds to make a choice that would either end her nightmare or start a brand new one. She could let Derek Shaw, the man who had spent a year haunting her every shadow, corner her in this crowded ballroom, or she could gamble her life on the one man even Derek was afraid to look at. Standing across the skyscraper gala, draped in cold authority and a crisp white shirt, was Vincent Blackwood. He was the king of the city's underworld, a man whose name was only whispered in backrooms. As Derek's hand reached out for her through the crowd, Ava didn't run for the door. She ran for the fire. The red wine hit Vincent's white shirt like a fresh bloodstain, and the entire room went silent. Ava's heart hammered against her ribs as Vincent's fingers snapped around her wrist, firm, possessive, and dangerously calm. He didn't look at the mess. He looked at the fear in her eyes, then at the man pursuing her. Leaning in, Vincent's voice was a dark velvet promise. "You chose a dangerous way to get my attention, Ava. Now, you owe me. If you want to see what happens when a debt to a king becomes your only sanctuary, stay until the end. This is a story of shadows, obsession, and the price of protection." Don't forget to subscribe and let me know in the comments, would you trust a devil to save you from a monster? The heavy scent of lilies in the ballroom should have been soothing, but to me it smelled like a funeral. Every time I adjusted the silk of my red dress, I felt the phantom weight of Derek's shadow pressing against my spine. For a year, he hadn't just followed me, he had colonized my life. It started with accidental encounters at my favorite coffee shop, then moved to silent phone calls at 3 a.m. that tasted like static and malice. By the 6-month mark, he had managed to get me fired from the gallery, whispering lies to my boss about instability until I was escorted out with my belongings in a cardboard box. Derek didn't want to date me, he wanted to inhabit me. I remembered the night I found my spare key missing, only to wake up and find a single Polaroid on my nightstand, a photo of me sleeping, dated and signed with a heart. The police called it a civil matter because there were no broken bones, but my soul was fracturing daily. He was a ghost I couldn't exorcise, a man who used his wealth to buy the silence of neighbors and the indifference of the law. He had systematically stripped away my friends, my career, and my dignity until I was nothing but a captive in a city of millions. Tonight was supposed to be my last stand, the high society gala where I hoped the sheer volume of witnesses would act as a shield. But as I stood near the velvet curtains, I saw him. Derek was leaning against a marble pillar, his eyes locked onto mine with a terrifying, calm possessiveness. He didn't look like a monster, he looked like a handsome, successful man checking on his investment. He began to weave through the crowd, his pace slow and predatory, the invisible noose tightening around my throat with every step he took. I looked at the exit, but his associates, men he paid to protect his interests, were already drifting toward the doors. I was trapped in a room full of crystal and gold, and within seconds, I would be back in his car, back in his house, back in his cage. My lungs burned as the air grew thin. I needed a distraction, a shield, or a miracle. That was when I saw him. Vincent Blackwood was a pillar of ice in a room of melting facades. He sat at a reserved table in the center of the room, surrounded by a vacuum of space that no one dared to cross. The Korean king of the city's darkest corners. Derek was a monster, yes, but Vincent was a force of nature. If I was going to be destroyed, I decided in that heartbeat of pure, crystalline terror, I would choose the hand that did it. I grabbed a glass of Merlot from a passing tray, my fingers trembling, and began to walk. Not away from the predator, but toward the king. The transition from the chaos of the gala to the interior of Vincent Blackwood's armored sedan was silent and absolute. I sat pressed against the leather door, my breath still hitching in my chest, watching the blurred lights of the city streak past like fallen stars. Beside me, Vincent was a statue of shadow and tailored wool. He hadn't spoken since we left the ballroom, yet his presence filled the car until there was barely enough room for my own fear. I looked down at my wrist, where the faint red marks of his grip were already fading, replaced by a cold, numbing realization, I had traded a stalker for a king, and I had no idea what the currency of this new world was. The estate sat on a jagged cliff overlooking the dark expanse of the sea, a fortress of glass and steel that looked as if it had been carved directly from the moonlight. We moved through the foyer in a blur of hushed voices and bowing guards until we reached his private study. The room smelled of old paper, expensive bourbon, and the dangerous, clean scent of the man himself. Vincent walked behind a desk carved from dark oak and finally looked at me, really looked at me, with eyes that seemed to read the secrets I'd buried a year ago. "You're trembling, Ava," he said, his voice a low vibration that seemed to settle in my bones. He didn't offer a chair. He didn't offer comfort. "You made a very public scene tonight. You used my reputation as a shield against a man who isn't worth the dirt on my shoes." "He was going to take me," I whispered, my voice cracking. "I didn't have anywhere else to go." Vincent leaned forward, the light catching the sharp angle of his jaw. "In my world, nothing is free. You want protection? You want to never have to look over your shoulder again." He stood up, walking slowly around the desk until he was inches away, his shadow swallowing mine. "The contract is simple. You stay here, under my roof and under my rules. You belong to this house now. In exchange, I will erase Derek Shaw from your existence. If he so much as breathes the air in your direction, I will ensure he never breathes again." The gravity of his words hung in the air, heavy and irreversible. It wasn't a request, it was a decree. He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a touch that was unexpectedly light, yet felt like a brand. "He is a ghost now, Ava. But ghosts can't hurt you when you belong to a devil." I looked into those piercing, controlled eyes and felt a strange, terrifying spark of relief. For the first time in a year, the noose didn't feel like it was tightening. It felt like it had been cut, only to be replaced by a golden chain. I nodded once, a silent surrender to the debt I now owed. "Good," Vincent murmured, his gaze dropping to my lips for a fraction of a second before he turned away. "Get some rest. Your life as you knew it ended at that gala. Tomorrow, we begin your new one." The morning light in the estate was as cold and precise as the man who owned it. I found Vincent in a high-tech command center hidden behind a seamless wall in his library, a room where the air hummed with the software of servers and the glow of a dozen monitors. He didn't look up as I entered. He was dressed in another immaculate white shirt, the sleeves rolled up to reveal forearms that spoke of a different kind of labor than the digital warfare unfolding on the screens before him. "Come here, Ava," he commanded, his voice devoid of its usual dark warmth. I walked over, my breath hitching as I saw my own life laid bare across the monitors. It wasn't just my social media or my bank statements. It was a digital map of my soul. Vincent's team had bypassed layers of encryption I didn't even know existed to find what Derek had hidden. One screen showed a live feed from the camera of my old laptop, which I'd sold months ago. Derek had been watching me through it the entire time. Another displayed a log of every keystroke I'd made, every panicked search for restraining orders and hidden shelters, all routed through a server Derek controlled. "He didn't just follow you," Vincent murmured, his eyes tracking a scrolling line of code. "He built a digital cage around you. He's been intercepting your emails to the police, replacing them with automated, all-clearer messages. That's why no one ever came. In the eyes of the grid, you were a woman who was perfectly happy." The room felt like it was tilting. The sheer scale of Derek's obsession was a physical weight, but it was eclipsed by the terrifying efficiency of the man standing next to me. In a single night, Vincent had dismantled a year of Derek's carefully constructed surveillance. He hadn't just found the bugs, he had already traced the funding back to Derek's offshore accounts and redirected the flow. "What are you doing?" I asked, watching a progress bar reach 100%. "I am deleting him," Vincent said. It wasn't a metaphor. By noon, his credit cards will be declined. His lease will be voided. His professional licenses will be flagged for fraud. To the world, Derek Shaw is becoming a ghost. And to me. He finally turned, his piercing gaze locking onto mine. He is a target. I realized then that Vincent didn't just have guards and guns. He had the power to unmake a person. He controlled the architecture of reality in this city, and I was now a part of his design. The relief was a sharp, jagged thing. I was finally safe from the monster, but I was standing in the very center of the devil's web. Vincent reached out, his cool fingers brushing a stray blonde hair from my face. "Don't look so frightened, Ava," he whispered. "The world is a dangerous place. It's better to be the one holding the eraser." The afternoon sun cut through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the estate's private gym, casting long, sharp shadows across the polished floor. I stood in the center of the room, my heart hammering against my ribs, as Vincent paced around me like a predator deciding where to strike. He had discarded his jacket, his white shirt unbuttoned at the collar, sleeves rolled high to reveal the coiled tension in his arms. "Again," he commanded, his voice a low gravel. I stepped forward, but as he made a sudden, sharp movement toward me, I flinched. My shoulders hunched, my eyes darted to the floor, and I retreated 2 steps before I even realized I was moving. It was a reflex, a year of Derek's lessons carved into my nervous system. Vincent stopped. The silence in the room was heavy, suffocating. He didn't look angry, he looked disappointed, which felt infinitely worse. He walked toward me, not with the erratic energy of a stalker, but with the steady, inevitable pace of a landslide. I tried to hold my ground, but my knees felt like water. "You are still waiting for the blow, Ava," he murmured, stopping so close I could feel the heat radiating from his chest. "You are looking for a way to disappear. But in this house, we do not disappear. We occupy space." He reached out, his large hand settling firmly on my shoulders. I gasped, my muscles locking, but he didn't let go. Instead, he forced my shoulders back, squaring them against the world. His touch was a strange paradox, absolute dominance paired with a grounding stability. "Look at me," he whispered. I raised my gaze, meeting eyes that were as dark and deep as the sea at midnight. For a moment, the air between us seemed to vibrate with a sudden, electric heat. The fear was still there, but it was being rapidly overtaken by a dizzying awareness of his proximity, the scent of sandalwood and cold steel, the way his thumb brushed almost accidentally against the sensitive skin of my neck. "Derek won through silence," Vincent said, his face inches from mine. "He won because he made you believe that making yourself small would keep you safe. It didn't. It only made you easier to crush." He moved behind me, his chest pressing against my back as he adjusted my stance, his hand sliding down to my waist to anchor me. The contact sent a jolt of pure adrenaline through my veins. "Feel the floor beneath you. You are not a guest in your own life anymore. You are the foundation." He stepped back and made the same sudden lunging motion. This time, I didn't recoil. I shivered, my breath hitching, but I kept my eyes on his and my feet planted. A slow, dangerous smile spread across Vincent's face, the first real smile I had seen from him. It wasn't kind, but it was triumphant. "There," he whispered, stepping back into my space, his gaze dropping to my mouth for a heartbeat longer than necessary. "That is the woman I bought. Never let them see you shrink again." The peace of the estate was shattered not by a sound, but by a vibration. My phone, resting on the marble kitchen island, began to scream with notifications, a relentless, rhythmic pulse of malice. I reached for it, my fingers trembling, and felt the floor drop out from under me. Derek had played his final, desperate card. On every social media platform, in every professional circle I had once inhabited, and even on local news forums, images of me appeared. Private, vulnerable moments captured through the hidden cameras Vincent had discovered, paired with fabricated stories of my instability and criminal history. The digital cage hadn't just been for watching, it had been a warehouse for my destruction. I felt the familiar, cold bloom of shame rising in my throat, a suffocating heat that made me want to curl into a ball and disappear. I was a ghost again, but this time, the haunting was public. "Don't look," a voice commanded from the doorway. Vincent walked toward me, his face a mask of terrifying, obsidian calm. He didn't look at my phone, he looked only at me. He took the device from my hand and set it face down, his touch firm and grounding. "He thinks he's burning your world down," Vincent murmured, his eyes tracking the single tear that escaped and tracked down my cheek. "He doesn't realize he just handed me the torch." Vincent signaled to a man standing in the shadows of the hallway, his lead technician. "Execute the scorched earth protocol. I want Shaw scrubbed. Not just his data. His life." What followed was a display of power that redefined my understanding of the word. While I sat in the library, wrapped in one of Vincent's heavy cashmere sweaters, the world outside began to tilt for Derek Shaw. Vincent didn't just delete the photos, he replaced them. Within the hour, every link Derek had shared redirected to a comprehensive dossier of his own crimes, bank records showing his embezzlement, GPS logs of his stalking, and sworn affidavits from other women he had silenced. By mid-afternoon, Derek wasn't just a pariah, he was a fugitive. Vincent's influence reached into the very boards of directors Derek served on, triggering emergency votes that stripped him of his shares and his titles. The Man of the Year was being unmade in real time. Vincent walked into the library as the sun began to set, leaning against the doorframe with a dark, satisfied grace. "The police are at his apartment now, Ava. But they won't find him. He's running. And in this city, there is nowhere to run where I cannot see." He crossed the room and sat beside me, his presence a shield against the digital fire. "He tried to humiliate you to keep you small. Now, he is the one who will have to live in the dark." I looked at him, the fear of Derek finally being replaced by a fierce, soaring sense of justice. For the first time, I didn't feel like a victim of the machine. I felt like the one who owned the operator. Late that night, the estate was gripped by a silence so heavy it felt structural. I found myself wandering the east wing, drawn by a flickering amber light toward a gallery I hadn't yet explored. I stopped at the threshold, my breath catching. Vincent was there, but he wasn't the untouchable titan who commanded the city's shadows. He was standing before a massive, gold-framed portrait of a man with his same sharp jawline but eyes that lacked his icy restraint. Vincent didn't turn as I approached. He held a glass of untouched bourbon, his gaze fixed on the painting with a raw, hollow intensity. In the dim light, the usual armor of his tailored suit seemed to weigh him down, his shoulders curving under the invisible pressure of a legacy he hadn't chosen. "My father built this empire on the broken bones of anyone who stood in his way," he whispered, his voice a ghost of its usual authority. "He taught me that power was the only thing that could keep us safe. But he didn't tell me that power is a cage you build for yourself." He finally looked at me, and for the first time, I didn't see the Korean king or the boss. I saw a man who had been a soldier since he was a boy, forced to wash the blood from his hands so he could hold the walls of his world together. He told me about the day he watched his mother's laughter die, replaced by the cold, vacant stare of a woman who lived in a fortress but was never home. He spoke of the loneliness of the throne, how everyone looked at him and saw a weapon, a savior, or an ATM, but never just a person. "The world thinks I am a devil because I have to be, Ava," he said, his voice dropping to a low, weary vibration. "If I blink, if I show a single crack, the wolves I keep at bay will devour everything I've sworn to protect." In that moment, the distance between us evaporated. I saw the cost of his protection, the silent toll of being the monster that keeps other monsters away. My hand found his, my fingers lacing through his larger, scarred palm. I wasn't seeking his strength this time, I was offering mine. The boss vanished, and in the quiet of the gallery, I realized that we were both survivors, he from a life of violent duty, and I from a life of violent obsession. I reached up, my thumb tracing the tired line of his jaw, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of genuine peace in his eyes. I had walked into the arms of a devil to escape a monster, but I had found a man who needed saving just as much as I did. The peace of the estate was shattered 2 nights later. A sudden, violent crack of thunder was followed by a silence so absolute it rang in my ears. Every light in the grand hallway died instantly. The scorched earth protocol had backed Derek into a corner, and a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. Through the backup generator's low, struggling hum, I heard the heavy, rhythmic thud of a side door being kicked in downstairs. Vincent's security was elite, but Derek had spent a year obsessively learning my habits, and he had used the citywide blackout to bypass the digital gate before the physical one could lock. "Ava!" His voice echoed through the dark, sharp, distorted, and dripping with a terrifying familiarity. I didn't hide under the bed. I didn't make myself small. I retreated to Vincent's study, my fingers closing around a heavy, silver letter opener from the desk. I remembered Vincent's hands on my shoulders, his voice telling me to occupy space. When Derek burst through the door, a flashlight cutting a jagged, frantic path through the darkness, he didn't find a trembling girl. He found a woman standing her ground in the center of the room. "Come home, Ava," he sneered, his face a frantic mask of sweat and desperation. He lunged for me, his hand reaching for the throat he used to squeeze, but I didn't flinch. I stepped into his space, using the momentum Vincent had taught me, and drove the butt of the tool into his solar plexus. As he gasped for air, shocked by my resistance, I shoved him back with a strength that came from a year of suppressed rage. Derek stumbled, the flashlight clattering to the floor, casting long, monstrous shadows against the walls. "I am home, Derek," I hissed, my voice steady and cold, echoing the authority I had learned from the man who protected me. "And you are nothing but a trespasser." He scrambled to his feet, his eyes wild with the realization that he no longer owned me. He went to strike, but a shadow detached itself from the doorway. Vincent appeared like a phantom of lethal intent, his eyes reflecting the silver light of the moon. He didn't intervene immediately, he waited until he saw the fire in my eyes, the way I refused to recoil even as Derek snarled. I didn't need the devil to save me tonight. I had already walked out of the cage, and for the first time, the monster was the one who was afraid. The silence that followed Derek's removal was heavier than the blackout itself. Vincent's men had moved with ghostly efficiency, spiriting a broken, raving Derek into the night, not to a grave, but to a high-security facility where he would face the cold, digital evidence of his crimes under the watchful eye of a legal team that didn't know how to lose. The monster was gone, purged from the city's grid and my life in one swift, surgical strike. 3 days later, I stood on the balcony of the estate, watching the sunrise bleed gold over the sea. The air was crisp, tasting of salt and a freedom I hadn't felt in a lifetime. I heard the steady, rhythmic click of dress shoes on the stone behind me. I didn't need to turn to know it was Vincent. The scent of sandalwood and expensive tobacco always preceded him. "The paperwork is finalized, Ava," he said, his voice a low vibration in the morning air. He stopped beside me, looking out at the horizon. "Derek Shaw is legally non-existent. The restraining orders are permanent, the evidence is ironclad, and your old accounts have been restored and cleared of his interference." He reached into his pocket and placed a small, encrypted key card on the railing between us. "You are free. There is a car waiting downstairs to take you wherever you want to go. A new apartment is waiting in your name, and your debt to me is settled. You owe me nothing." I looked at the card, then up at the man who had offered me a devil's bargain only to treat me with more respect than anyone I had ever known. He stood there, his jaw tight, his expression a mask of his usual controlled intensity, but I saw the slight tension in his hands. He was bracing himself for me to leave. He was waiting for me to run, just like everyone else in his life had. "You said I stay here under your rules," I whispered, stepping closer until I could feel the heat of him. "But you never mentioned what happens if I want to stay because I'm tired of running." Vincent turned to me, his dark eye searching mine for any hint of fear or obligation. "You don't have to stay, Ava. The cage is open. I know, I said, reaching out to cover his hand with mine. But I don't want a cage, Vincent. And I don't want a savior. I want to stand beside the man who taught me how to occupy my own space. A slow, genuine warmth finally broke through his icy exterior. He didn't grab my wrist this time, he cupped my cheek, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw with a tenderness that made the world stand still. I am a dangerous man to love, Ava. And I am a dangerous woman to underestimate, I countered, a small smile playing on my lips. He pulled me into him then, his embrace firm and protective, but for the first time, we were equals. The debt was settled, the monster was dead, and as the sun rose over the city, I realized that I hadn't just survived, I had finally begun to live.